Como eu vos tinha dito há pouco, vamos ter agora a apresentação do Fredrik, da Ecchorights, que nos vai falar sobre distribuição internacional. Deixo-vos, portanto, com o Fredrik. Fredrik.
Good morning. Thank you very much for inviting me to continue the great speech this morning from Chris. I fully agree that it's a very interesting time, quite challenging, because I think lots of things are changing and will change even more than we think. But for producers of good content, such as Portuguese producers, I think there is a lot of potential. And not at least Netflix has really taught the world that, because like 5 years ago, the classic thing when we came to any country was that, oh, this kind of content will never work in Chile, or will never work in Italy, or will never work here. And I think Netflix has shown that it's simply not true anymore. Anything can work anywhere. And what we are specializing in is non-English language drama. There we are being very successful in building up drama export from different countries. Our claim to fame is Turkish drama, where we started basically 12 years ago. An old friend of mine, Çağatay, came to me and said, I've done a drama series, Fredrik, do you want to screen it? And I perhaps smiled a little bit inwards and said, yes, of course, I'll screen it. And I went to him and did it, and I just loved it. And that was a cell that we launched 10 years ago, and ever since we've been extremely successful in being a part of a Turkish drama wave. That started to be, but it was not only about Turkey. Turkey is amazing, but it's more of a general trend where actually an executive, head of director at Netflix told me that Narcos was, like 2 years ago when it was launched, America's most watched TV program. And that's 60% in Spanish, or I think 80% in Spanish. It was more popular than the Super Bowl. And I think that trend, they don't release the figures, but really non-English language drama has a lot of potential. And that's our job, to help producers to explore that. So we have offices in Stockholm, Istanbul, Madrid, and Seoul. We are a compact team of 20 people, and our job is to represent producers, meaning the owners of the IP that we represent. It can be, in most cases, co-owned by the broadcaster, but really to take that to a next level. Last year we sold for $40 million, and it's growing. We represent 3,000 hours. It's growing by around 1,000 hours per year, mainly Turkish. We licensed actually 14,000 hours last year into the world, which is pretty massive amount of TV. We invest a lot in marketing, because in this new market is really about having your show to be seen and recognized, because it's not only in the US they produce much more than before, it's the same all over the world. And that's why the focus is more important than ever, that you actually really focus on that hit show. And then you can build based on that hit. We're also working a lot with script adaptations. We spoke a little bit about the possibility to adapt scripts in America, and that's one potential, but there are many others. We have a few scripts right now where we have more than 7-8 different adaptations around the world, because with all this amount of drama being produced, producers are starved of good scripts. And of course, if you can come with a good script already, then the risk for the client that you have is lower. So we do around 10 script adaptations per year, and that is growing. And we are, since December last year, we had an old investor that invested in us many years ago, and that we replaced with CJE&M, which is Asia's largest media company. So we are part of a bigger entity right now. So just a quick little introduction of what we do. So the way we see the market is like the classic model where you have a producer working for one broadcaster. It's still a very nice scenario because it's safe, but it's a little bit unlimited. We want to work with producers in a different way, where we represent the producer together with the broadcaster, and the first thing we do is to arrange the financing, share the equity with the different parties involved. I mean, the original broadcaster is super important, that investment is very important, but then we add other components to it and share the equity, who's owning what. Then once you have a show produced, of course you have a pay and free TV window that is still there. It's tending more and more to be older audience and less attractive depending on the territory you are on Earth. But then of course the SVODs and the TVODs, there you can do, which is interesting to see because most American series are like in many markets, they are on 5, 6, 7 different platforms. If you are in Korea, for example, the classic thing for an American network show is to be placed on 8 platforms with revenue share. So it takes a bit more in investment. American drama is tending to be much less attractive because nobody watches it, the classic network show anymore in the world, more or less. But you can still put it on rev share platforms. So the whole SVOD and TVOD and FVOD is becoming much more complex, but much more important. Most Turkish series have around like 1 billion views per series on YouTube. And that is becoming, so they're put up on YouTube mainly in Turkish, but when the CPM is growing, that is becoming more and more money. 5 years ago, the CPM in Germany was $5 per thousand. Now it's up in 15, and in some countries it's up to 25. And of course, if you can put it up on YouTube and make a better deal with them and arrange that properly, then that can be an important, add-on money. And it's also funny because very few of the free TV and pay TV clients are actually complaining that the series is on YouTube because they don't really get it. And it's also, even it increases your capability of being high on the rankings when Netflix buys things because it's becoming higher in the social media ranking. So it's all becoming like one game where you manage all the different windows together, some tending more and more to become like a music industry where you put it on Spotify and you manage the direct-to-consumer relationship through a platform more or less yourself. So that I think is the overall trend, but still to produce TV is much more expensive than music, so you have to manage it more properly. And then we have on the last there is the format remakes, where we do lots of remakes, but you need to be very careful in doing them, not doing them too early. It's better to wait a few years so you can sell your original first. And then be very careful, because in the American market, for example, they pay incredibly small amounts for a remake. We have, for example, one case where we have a Turkish script called The End. There we did a pilot in the US for ABC that didn't get picked up. If that would have happened, we would have gotten $500,000 per season. But then instead, we had no holdbacks in the rest of the world, and now we're making 6 different versions of the same script and making probably between 2 and 3 million a year. So the American market is good for prestige to make a remake, but if you can manage other remakes in the world, or getting it if you take Mother from Japan, for example, which is a big hit in Turkey, they are having 30% of the back end plus the license fee. And that can bring in 50 times more money than a US remake. The problem with the US remake is also that you have lots of restrictions what you can do with the original tape. So when you do American, it's fun for the prestige, small money, can be good, but be careful what you give away. So this is the work that we do with producers, and through our offices around the world, we're doing this flower in each local regional market, because there's a lot of potential if you do it properly in Latin America, if you do it properly in Asia, in Middle East, Eastern Europe, and everywhere else. We try to push quite hard and big on new series and really make the buyers, because we sometimes call the buyers of TV shows like sheeps. You have to have a dog running them because if some start to run, you get them to run all in the same direction. And because they are very cautious of taking risks, So if you get enough and make good PR about the first deals, they all tend to do the same thing. So our job is very much to get that running, and therefore we need to be involved early. A very interesting case is the Turkish drama in Latin America. That was, we were going to NatB for many years, and I had many meetings where they said, Fredrik, you're a nice guy, but don't try to sell me a Turkish series. It will never work in Latin America. And then we convinced Juan Ignacio at Mega in Chile, who was at the time the 5th channel. They were losing $1 million a year. And we convinced them to try Turkish. I got calls the weeks before saying that, oh, you have to change the music. Latin people will never accept this music. And it will never work. You have to dub it or you can't dub in this accent. It has to be this way. And in 1 year, Mega put 4 Turkish dramas in prime time, and they became #1 channel, earning $1 million instead of losing in just 1 year time, and they've kept the #1 position since then. This is a summary. This is actually 2 years old. I think it's even stronger right now, where this is the top 15 shows of all TV shows on air in those countries, and the yellow ones are Turkish series dubbed into Spanish. It's just an incredible performance. And even the, some episodes of Fatma Gul, for example, had a higher rating than the football match between Argentina and Chile. So it's really becoming an enormous phenomenon. And I will analyze a little bit why I think it works so well. There are just a little overview of our case studies, and I will be a bit generous of sharing the numbers just to give you a perspective. SL was the first one we launched. We've sold it to 150 countries, meaning like probably 120 different licenses. We've had like 70-80% ratings a share in some markets. And it's still selling very well. We make 10, and it's a 10-year-old series. We launched Karadai right after, sold it for more than $25 million. The End was kind of a flop in Turkey. It didn't work very well. It was a little bit too modern, but it was a very strong script. And we sold it to 40 countries, but we've done, I think, 6 different versions right now, including El Accidente, that was a big hit in Spain last year. And then when you're selling a script, what they did in Spain, they just used the first plot in the first episode, and they changed the story completely. And we allowed that because it was actually a much better script in Spain than in Turkey. But that's the way it goes. I mean, if you start with the option and manage it properly, even the development of a local producer is becoming your property if you do it well. Fatma Gul is a Canal D project, but we've handled the format rights. We adapted it in Indian. It's coming up in Spain after the success there. Elif is another case. We tried a daily series in Turkey, extremely low budget, quite poor technical quality, especially in the beginning, on a small channel, Canal 7, which is more a conservative channel. It just happened to work very well because it was super traditional. It's really like social realism put in a daily drama. We're now on air we made 50 deals, 45 deals, and it's on the 6th season, so it's more than order for 6 seasons, so we have 1,200 episodes. I will come back to the numbers of that one. The other ones are more high-end big drama series with the biggest stars in Turkey from APIT that we launched the last year, all performing really well. And now we have a slate of some big weekly dramas, but also some daily dramas that are coming up right now that are performing really well. But we can sell a little bit cheaper because lots of the clients of linear TV channels are, a bit in financial trouble. So therefore, we think it's good for them to sell something cheaper that they can fill the schedule, but that still works very well. This is a summary of some of the sales figures. Brave and Beautiful, we are still now on 16 million in sales. Stiletto is a newer one, 8 million. Elif, as you see, because it's such a long one, we sold it for 33 million, expecting by the end of this year. Top series, they're selling between 20 and 30 million. And this is because the structure in the Turkish market, Turks are very clever. They have done it very well. There are several reasons why it works. Of course, it's production quality, but it's also the structure of the industry. So let's take a little look of how, let me see. basically the subject of this panel or discussion, how to launch a global hit and make a case study of what has the Turks done right, both business structure and content-wise. And what can Portugal learn? Because I think you do. I've been screening more intensively the last weeks, 5 or 6 of your series, and I think there is a lot of potential there. But I think you can perhaps consider some structural things to make it fly, really. Why it sells so well? It's a very competitive home market. Of course, they have high budgets. When we came in Latin America, we understood that the Turks are probably producing per hour at 2 or 3 times the classic Latin American telenovelas. And of course, I mean, quality pays off. It's also that they have a new way of storytelling. I think Turkey happens to be very centrally positioned. They look like the average global citizen in a way. It's a bit of east and a bit of west. So it just happened to be very well positioned in the global race. It's a clear business structure. The Turkish market, media market distribution is kind of a low degree of vertical integration. Producers are producers, broadcasters are broadcasters, distributors are distributors. That makes every layer very competitive. So if you don't deliver well, you're out for that, and you're being punished immediately. And that pressure is very important. And the Turkish government has been very clever. Erdogan went to Latin America promising that we will dub every Turkish series into Spanish on the government's expense. And of course that helps. I think it's a more clever, instead of having production incentives, having American production coming to your country and you pay part of a bill to support the actual sales, it's much more dynamic. So if you go to the Turkish government, you can get the subsidy to dub it into new language, for example. Which is very important because it makes that first deal easier. If you maybe the first deal you don't even finance the dubbing, but once it's dubbed, you can sell it a lot. And then there is very high incentives for producers. They make a lot of money for the series that work. I will come back to that. But on the content side, why does it work? We were a little bit scratching our heads for Latin America. Why does it work? Because the story is that the Turks in the 80s had lots of Latin American telenovelas on air in prime time. So a whole generation had like those classic telenovelas that they watched, and they learned, and then they made it themselves. So one day, Alejandra came up into Istanbul. She got fired from her job. She was a clerk in a bank. She had no money. She spent half a year watching Turkish series, most of them in Turkish. And she got so fond, so she borrowed money from her mother to go to Istanbul to visit the set of Karaday. And she came in the office, a wonderful lady. We've now hired her to do translations for us. So she got a half-time job at least for us now, and she's very happy. She's working what she really loves. And we asked her, how is Turkish drama different from the telenovelas that you've been watching before? And just to make a very quick conclusion, why she thinks it's different. First of all, obviously the production quality. It's compelling original scripts, it's important subplots. Classical telenovela tend to be more straightforward with one story. Turkish series are very complex with different subplots. And that also makes it more interesting for more audiences. There is always a male, even though the main story often is quite female, there is always an underlying plot that is also more appealing to perhaps to classical men. The great original music, the music is just amazing in Turkish series, and that really works. That was what they advised us to change in the launch in Chile. Actors are attractive. I mean, many of them are ex-models and so, but compared to telenovela stars who look perhaps more artificial, they look more real. They don't feel like super, I mean, they look more like you and me. They're dirty, they are, bad and good. They're not like too plastic. And there's a very high degree on scenes shot on location. The classic telenovela is very much in studio. And now it doesn't cost, you don't need lighting, it's become much more easy to produce things on location. And Turkish series is a lot in location. The Other thing that ethics and moral values plays a very significant role. It's very much about how to be a good human being. Perhaps a little bit old-fashioned, you can feel, but very relevant, and I think we're missing that. I mean, how do you do if your father asks you to marry somebody that he has decided? What's the moral or revenge and all those kind of things, but done from a very, let's say, yeah, about moral issues. And they dare to be silent a lot. They can have like, we've clocked scenes where the beautiful male actors spending like 3 minutes of explaining how much he loves someone. And much of those times he's actually silent. And that's very daring for a producer to, I mean, in most other countries people talk all the time. But it really works. And the gender roles is interesting. Men are protecting women, they are gentlemen, but they don't treat women as possessions. They are like, it's actually a much more stronger female role than you perhaps would expect in those series. Which I think is, obviously the, and also the emphasis of true love without showing all the explicit scenes. It's a part of perhaps a more conservative culture, but I think people are a bit tired. I mean, you understand it doesn't get more attractive just because you show more. It can actually be more attractive if you sometimes show less. And what more? Yeah, loyal brotherhood and communal support are important. And yeah, those were her conclusions. One thing that I think is very important, why it works so well is in Turkey, is how they share the back end. And the back end means the revenues from international sales after the different costs. Because in Turkey, the producer gets 50% from the first deals, normally, between 30 and 50%. And that sounds generous, perhaps a bit even stupid by the broadcaster to do that, because they pay most of the budget. But really to do this structure it's a plus-sum game. It's great, the more you give him, the more you get as a broadcaster. And I think Turkish producers has been clever in negotiating that, and I think also the producers, the broadcasters has understood that it actually works. So I think it's really worth taking a look at. An international comparison, UK, for example, they had, in 2012, they introduced something called Terms of Trade, which was kind of a law, but not really. It was a voluntary agreement pushed by the government, where the producer keeps all the IP. And it's a very extreme law. The broadcaster can only get 15% of international revenue. In the UK case. And they can only keep it for 5 years. After that period, the producer has to own it all. And what happened is that their export growth from 175 million in 2004 to 1.3 billion in 2016. Because the dynamics of this, and think of it, I mean, a broadcaster is a great organization to finance production, to sell advertising, and to make it really attractive to the audience in the home country. But it's not really they're not really normally set up to make a great export. And of course they should be rewarded for the investment they do. But the truth is, if you want to make it grow, you have to share more, because the producer who is having that stress delivery, hard budget, if you're going to have him to run that extra mile or to invest a little bit more, you have to reward him, because then you get quality, then you get goal excitement. And I'm absolutely convinced that Turkey wouldn't have been half the way if they would have more of a total buyout. In Turkey, they have 50-50 split after distribution fee, and they've become the second largest exporter of drama in the world, from nothing 10 years ago. Sweden is another interesting example, is much smaller country, but there is a back end of 30 to 50%, and the global sales is growing a lot, quite trend-setting. Germany, on the other hand, they have still a total buyout. They do a lot of good drama, but they hardly sell anything. I mean, you have, a few series, scripted reality, they have been pushed in to sell their scripts instead of the ready-mades, but it's not a very dynamic market, and I think it's because the big media conglomerates doesn't share. It doesn't mean that I don't think the brave investment of a broadcaster should pay off. But I am just telling it has to be organized in a way where everybody makes a good deal from it. Otherwise, nothing will happen. And too much happens in the world to be stuck in that situation. Yeah, those were my conclusions.